Welcome to the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast series. Our show is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest app, which allows innkeepers to provide guests with their recommendations of the best local places to eat, play, and shop during their stay. The Frictionless Guest app is accessible through all mobile desktop devices, and you can learn more about it by visiting frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. I'm Matt Langen, and I'll be joined by Steve Short, the founder and CEO of the Frictionless Guest app. And as many innkeepers are developing strategies for reopening their businesses for the summer season, providing guests with the utmost confidence that their properties are clean, disinfected, and safe is paramount. And today we're speaking with Teresa Luttrell, the owner of Enliven Bed and Breakfast, and located in Kenmore, Washington. Enliven Bed and Breakfast has a very well-known reputation for being a chemical and fragrance-free inn. And for this episode, Teresa will be offering her insights into how innkeepers can safely reopen their property with the right cleaning strategies. And Teresa and Steve, how you both doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome. Steve, how are you?
Doing fine, Matt. Thanks, Teresa, for coming on board again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me back.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, Teresa, if you don't mind, let's kick it off. And if you don't mind, remind our listeners about the Enliven Bed and Breakfast and how you all are really well known for being a chemical and fragrance-free inn.
Sure. Yeah, so Enliven is chemical-free and fragrance-free. Primarily, we serve people who are traveling to the greater Seattle area for medical treatment. Most of them have complex chronic illnesses and have become super sensitive to their environment. And so, regular people can't stay here, really, because of the chemical-free, fragrance-free requirement. Most people aren't fragrance-free, and becoming fragrance-free is kind of a journey to do that. So all of my business really is medical patients, and because of that, I really have had to develop some very, very intense and really effective sanitation and disinfection methods that don't use chemicals. And so that's the great part of that is that they actually work better than most chemical disinfectants, especially when it comes to things like biofilm. So, yeah, I've been in business now since 2009. I came to it through my own experience. I had a chronic illness that really messed with my immune system, and I became sensitive to lots of different things. But my own sensitivities, I knew and had dealt with and figured out strategies around that. But, everybody is different in the land of sensitivities. And so it was kind of like getting a master's degree, in the last 10 years, or maybe a doctorate, as I worked to really figure out ways to accommodate all of my guests. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, that's great. And in many ways, because of what you've been doing since 2009, applies perfectly for what most innkeepers are dealing with right now as they consider reopening and just dealing with COVID-19, right?
Yeah, because I completely sanitize and disinfect the rooms in between guests and, also the common areas. And so there's a lot to learn and a lot to be done. And one of the reasons that I also have a new venture called Chemical Free Inns that's devoted to educating the lodging industry and providing tools and products that are helpful in cleaning in a way that isn't damaging to patient health or guest health, your employees' health, or the environment. So that's the other focus that I'm sort of moving into at this point in time.
That's great. And, you mentioned earlier about biofilms. If you don't mind, tell us more about what biofilms are and the best way to embrace disinfectant strategies for removing biofilms.
Yeah, biofilms are tricky little buggers. A biofilm, I'm getting this from a paper that was published by the NIH. So a biofilm is an assemblage of microbial cells that is irreversibly associated, parentheses, not removed by gentle rinsing, with a surface. And it's enclosed in a matrix of primarily polysaccharide material. So essentially what a biofilm does is that a couple of microbes, whether they're bacterial or viral, get together and they start to hang out, and then they produce this matrix around themselves that protects them. And then that biofilm grows over time. They're difficult to treat. Chemical disinfectants have some problems with treating them. For one, because a biofilm actually has its own resistance mechanism when it's in its growth stage. And so it repels disinfectants. And a mature biofilm, once the disinfectant is able to penetrate it, it doesn't penetrate very far, and it may kill some of the organisms within the biofilm, but not all of them. And then there are studies that have shown that a biofilm that has had partial treatment like that with a chemical disinfectant, it can repopulate within an hour. So it's a major vector of disease. It's part of the reason why hospital-acquired infections are so tough to get on top of. And it's kind of a big deal. We have biofilms in our lives all the time. I mean, plaque is a biofilm that forms on your teeth. And, if you've ever cleaned a bathroom and there's sort of that pinkish stuff, around the edge of the tub, that's a biofilm in all likelihood. Most people think of it as mildew, but in all likelihood, that's actually a biofilm. Biofilms form in drains. They're well known for that. They can form in shower heads, any place where it's wet. That's why at Enliven, even though we sanitize and disinfect between guests, while the guests are here, I always wipe down and dry the bathrooms every single day. Our salt tubs, everything. I make sure everything has been wiped down with microfiber because that traps soap scum and to some degree bacteria and mold. And just the act of wiping that stuff down removes a food source, and having everything dry prevents the biofilms from even starting. So just a really helpful strategy that I've come to love and admire. My mom actually was the one that started us kids on making sure that we dried the bathroom every day when we took a shower or whatever. And we hated it as kids because it just seemed like, manual forced labor. But it's a really good idea because it does really help prevent the buildup of soap scum and all the things that feed off of it and these biofilms and all that kind of stuff. She's a very smart lady.
Yeah, great insights there on that. And Steve, I'll hand it over to you. I'm sure you have some follow-on questions.
Well, you're doing fine, Matt. I thought maybe I'd get to sit this one out for a change, but no. Well, the whole biofilm thing. Any other examples, especially for the life of an innkeeper? What you're saying is there are surfaces where biofilms are prone to maybe concentrate or whatever.
Yeah.
And damp surfaces seem to be one of them. But still, like, let's say I'm an innkeeper. I'm just hearing about this for the first time, and I want to make sure that my rooms are clean. And of course, the big concern is, I don't know, what if someone sneezed and had COVID-19 and they sneezed on a hard surface of a chest of drawers or whatever? I mean, can that create a biofilm, or what is it that, other than kind of normal cleaning, what do I have to be concerned with in terms of where these biofilm matrices or whatever can hang out? Like, what type of surfaces, that sort of thing. What do I need to be kind of cognizant of?
Yeah, places where there's moisture is huge. It's probably not all that likely that you would form a biofilm if someone sneezed on a surface per se. It just kind of depends on, how wet was the sneeze? How long is it going to stick around? That I don't know. But it's, for surface cleanings of things that are not typically wet, that you can use, a disinfectant product, whether it's chemical, although there are caveats with all of that, or using some of the strategies that I've found and love because they work so well, which is using a steam vapor system from Advanced Vapor Technologies, or in adjunct also using Briotech hypochlorous acid, which is a weak acid. It's really an effective disinfectant. It's in the final stages of EPA approval as a disinfectant. It's already registered with the EPA as a sanitizer. Other hypochlorous products are on the EPA list of approved disinfectants. But, those kinds of things are really effective. If you're using a chemical disinfectant, a lot of things, something that people don't often really, really grasp is that first you have to clean the surface really thoroughly because it needs to be clear of organic and inorganic material. So it has to be cleaned super well before the disinfectant is put on. Then it has to remain wet for the entire dwell time. That varies between products and for different types of organisms, but it can be up to 20 minutes of time needing to be wet. And then once that product is dried, then it has to be rinsed so that you get the chemical residue off of the surface. And a lot of people don't take that much time doing that. And so then you end up with this chemical residue, which is not healthy for your guests. If there were any biofilms around, that can also affect the biofilms. It's almost like, can almost create sort of like a protective layer from my understanding of how that all works. And that's, I don't know, that could just be a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. So the nice part about the advanced steam vapor system called the Ladybug and then also the MondoVap, they work super well against biofilm, and they literally destroy it with heat. They have a system called tanks, which is a way when the advanced steam vapor systems are employed with tanks. That's something that is registered or not registered. It can't be registered with the EPA unless it's a pesticide, classified as a pesticide. But it's recognized by the EPA as a disinfection device because the lab tests show that it sanitizes to disinfection levels, and it will literally destroy biofilm. It won't exist anymore. And so that's a really, really helpful tool, and you can use that on pretty much every surface in your lodging facility, which is a great thing. And then the Briotech HOCl is something that you would apply to a surface, but it's way more effective. It's 99.96% reduction in biofilm with HOCl and 99.95% with the advanced steam vapor system.
So now, Teresa, let me ask then, so it sounds like two different things. This, I think you said Briotech, the hydrochloric acid.
Hypochlorous, yeah.
What is it, hypochloric?
Hypochlorous, yeah. So hypochlorous acid that's something that the body actually makes itself. It's part of the innate immune system of the body, and it's, if you get an infection or a wound, the body immediately starts to make hypochlorous acid to address the risk of infection. So it is a biocompatible sanitizer and soon to be disinfectant. It's been approved by 34 states so far, so we're getting really close. And that means it's safe for skin and mucosa, so you can spray it on your face, you can spray it in your eyes. Ophthalmologists often use it for wound healing after eye surgery. The FDA approves it for use into an open wound, and you can spray it in your mouth even. They have an oral rinse. Yeah, it's an amazing product. And it's been known about for a long time, but nobody knew how to stabilize it. And so there are machines out there that will manufacture hypochlorous acid, but it has to be used in a very short time period or it starts to degrade. And it is part of the chlorine family, so it will degrade into chlorine, which is not great for human consumption in large quantities. So it's really a breakthrough product. I think it's going to change everything because, to have a product that disinfects that is really safe, that you can ingest and that's not going to harm you, that's pretty freaking amazing. Yeah.
So now,
not like you're going to drink it, not like you're going to inject it, right? I mean, that's not what we're talking about. But if you, use it as a rinse in your mouth, it's good. It's fine. It really helps. I actually had a friend of mine called me and just out of the blue said, gosh, I've got this sore in my mouth and it's really bugging me, and all of my usual things that I do to address things like this, they're not working. And I was like, well, have you tried, squirting it with HOCl? Because she had some. And she was like, oh no, I had some of that. And she did it, and within a day it was gone. It was better, and within hours it wasn't painful anymore, and it had really been bothering her. So it's a very effective product for wound healing, but it's also a super effective disinfectant. And in fact, it even reduces prions, which that's another subject altogether. But prions are something that is really difficult for hospitals to prevent the transmission of. It's thought to be something that is at the root of mad cow disease and possibly ALS. And this reduces prions by 99.9999%. And it's been tested against the human coronavirus, a different strain, of course, but it was very effective against that. So it's a kind of a game changer kind of thing. And I think the fact that it is something that is, made by the human body and is biocompatible, I think that will be an important thing for us in the lodging industry to use, because, we're taking care of our guests in so many ways. We're taking care of our guests by making sure that their environment is really healthy and sanitized and disinfected. And we're doing it with something that isn't going to be injurious to their health. Chemical disinfectants are not great for us, and they're not great for the environment either.
So now, in what form, you say this is a sanitizer spray, I guess, or can it be used effectively in different forms? Like, obviously, if you spray yourself, that's one thing. But
Mm-hmm.
if, like, in terms of cleaning, again, going back to the cleaning of the room, would you use it as, I know there's also the vapor thing, which I think we want to get into further, and I know there's hard surfaces, soft surfaces, whatever, there's challenges there. But in terms of the hypochloric acid spray, is that something that you might use for cleaning? Like you would spray a hard surface and then wipe it down with that? Or is it more an air kind of thing, or what?
Yeah, no, the product is in the midst of EPA approval for being a disinfectant, as a disinfectant. And so that is going to be a spray that you can spray on surfaces to disinfect surfaces. So it's applicable in a lot of different ways. It's great for skin and mucosa. It's great to sanitize and disinfect surfaces. There are studies that show that it also is effective at removing airborne pathogens. And, whenever I go to pick up product at the company, which is not far from me, I get fogged before I step in their building because they fog everybody to make sure that nobody's carrying anything in with them. And my contact at the company actually showed me they have like a tent set up back in their production area, and employees can go in there, and it's almost like, they go in there to be, I don't know what the right word is.
Disinfected or non-affected?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can breathe it in. So it's like they
Mm-hmm.
go into a little tent and it's being aerosolized in there, tiny particles, and they just go and sit in there and feel wonderful. And
So
I don't know. There are a lot of uses for it, I think, and this is just the beginning.
So it's really, it's
those,
just it's one liquid that can be used many different ways. It's not like it's going to be marketed
right.
as 10 different things. I mean, it might be, but it's all the same thing that can either be sprayed. It can actually be put into a humidifier or something. Because don't you do that at Enliven as well?
Yeah, I do. One of the doctors whose patients I house, he uses it at his clinic in the waiting room. And so it's just constantly going in an ultrasonic humidifier. And it just, anybody who comes in the street into the clinic, they will, be in that kind of an environment. And they haven't had any any downside with its use. That's not an approved use, I don't think, by the EPA at that point, even though there are studies that have shown that it's promising. But I think as time goes on, we're going to be able to use it in a lot of different ways. And it's really exciting. This product is very exciting. For those of us who are hygiene junkies, it's a very exciting development. I keep running across the phrase, hygiene is the new luxury, for lodging industry. And I think that's really true. I think going forward, there are just so many things that are happening, right? I looked at a timeline of major outbreaks, for the last 100 years or so. And of course, there was the 1918 flu pandemic, and then 1952, there was polio. And then there was nothing really until 1976. So between 1918 and 1975, there were two really big bad pathogens that hit. And then from 1976 to now, there were 10. And it's like, wow, that's increasing at a really high rate. So the likelihood that, SARS-CoV-19 is the last of them is minuscule, right? We're going to continue to see outbreaks of various viruses and other types of infections going forward because our world is changing. Things are changing. And it just seems to be the path that we are traversing. And so how are we going to respond to that as a lodging industry? Really, we need to respond by really upping our hygiene practices so that people do travel and that they do travel in a confident way, knowing that when they reach their destination, they're going to be staying someplace where it is safe to be, that we're taking the utmost care for them and their environment and for our employees. It's going to keep everything healthy, including our bottom line.
Now, we started to get into the air part of this, the humidifier, but before we go there, let's talk about surfaces a little bit more. and
Sure.
this whole advanced steam vapor thing, and why that's such an effective way of disinfecting, and apparently it's good on just about any surface, but why it's maybe good on the more difficult surfaces that you'd have to clean if you're not using it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic machine. So advanced steam vapor has a patented proprietary process. Their steam vapor systems have two tanks. One is the boiler, one is the reservoir. In between the two is a device called the tanks processor. And when water goes through that, it actually helps to kind of change the crystalline structure of the water, of the minerals in the water. You just use tap water to clean with this system. And what it does to the water, that's what helps it make the steam penetrate cells better. And so it's much more powerful in reaching things like biofilm, getting inside of a cell and then dissolving it from the inside. So it's not like you're, battling at the door trying to get in. It actually helps you get into the inside of the cell and then it destroys it. So it's interesting. There's a illustration that they have that shows the initial, minerals in the tap water is sort of a blocky structure. And then as it goes through the tanks processor, it becomes more pointed, which I always picture the points being able to penetrate the cells better. I don't know, but it's patented. It is, there have been lots of studies done. There's lots of scientific evidence that these machines with the tanks processor is what disinfects and eliminates bacteria, mold, viruses, biofilm, bed bugs. It's really great at killing bed bugs. It's really great at sanitizing and disinfecting just about anything. And it does it all within 7 seconds. So a lot of the organisms are killed on contact with this steam. It's very, very hot. The machines, depending on which machine you get, it varies somewhat in the temperature of the boiler. Depends on which machine you have. But I think the least is 290 degrees, and then the most is like 325. So they're extremely hot. Water at that temperature is going back and forth between steam and vapor. We really want the vapor part of it because vapor, the water particles in vapor are very small, and so they are quote unquote dry. They don't get things soaking wet when you steam them, and that's a really huge boon for the lodging industry. So when I am turning a room, the first thing I do, of course, is strip it, and then I steam the mattress, I steam the pillows, I steam the duvet, I steam all the soft surfaces in the room, chair cushions, draperies, all that kind of stuff. And then periodically I'll change out the towel. At the end of the wand, there are a couple different sizes of attachments. But what I do is I put there's a kind of like a little foam piece. It's not really foam. I don't even know exactly what it is. There's a janitorial term for what that exactly is, but it escapes me at the moment. And it's just kind of a filler piece. And you put that in and then wrap a towel around it. They call it diapering the ladybug or that Mondovap. And that helps to really concentrate the heat of the steam. It also collects the dirt, the bacteria, the destroyed mold, viruses, whatever it is, so that you're actually cleaning and disinfecting at the same time.
So when I think of steam, I know from having old houses my entire adult life and having steamed a lot of old wallpaper off of plaster walls, I know that's not a fun thing, and it's hot, and the steam is nasty. So this is even hotter than that. So you're saying it's not really a steam vapor per se, but it's very hot. So I'm assuming you can use it on obviously the mattresses, soft surfaces, and that's where it seems like it would be more effective than anything else you could probably come up with. But I assume though you wouldn't be. I mean, you can use it on bathroom counters, all of that kind of thing. And there goes your problem with biofilm in terms of wiping down with chemicals and having to come back 20 minutes later and wipe it down with water and that, or a damp rag or whatever, and still not be as effective. But I would think that chest of drawers I'm talking about that's 100 years old, maybe you're not going to use it on that type of a hard surface, or can you?
I actually do.
Okay.
What I do, because I have some furniture that are antique, and when I use it on that, I'm judicious about it. I don't leave it on there for a whole long time. But after I'm through steaming, what I do is I get some olive oil on a rag, and I put the moisture back into the wood, basically, is what I'm doing. And that works extremely well. That also works really well on leather furniture. I steam leather furniture, and every so often I go in and I reapply olive oil to my leather furniture, and it soaks it up. It's happy, it looks great, and it's been sanitized and also fed. So it's not losing the moisture. Okay. That's the big thing with steam when you use it on wood and porous materials, is that you're drawing the moisture out of it, basically, with something that's hot. The steam vapor is really hot, very small water particles, so it's penetrating really well, it's disinfecting, and it's not leaving things soaking wet. But it's also, those kinds of things can actually deplete wood and leather and things like that of moisture, so you need to add that back in when you're done.
Right. Okay. And so talk about time. You're saying 7 seconds in one place, but still that obviously takes some time if you're going to do an entire queen or king size mattress or whatever. And also talk about, if you can, what the models are that are out there and what the cost is, because I'm sure there are innkeepers saying, this sounds like a great idea, but what about time and money, like everything else, right?
Exactly.
And I know you're a lot more focused on, when you're turning over a room, on getting everything, perfect. Talk about how much time you think it would take if an innkeeper was going to use this, steam vapor system, about what you would expect it to take to do like the mattress and maybe some other soft surface type stuff that might really be considered important.
Yeah. So usually, when I do a room, it's at least probably 4 hours. But like you said, I really deep clean it. Depending on the size of the room, because that room too is bigger than my first house, well over 900 square feet. So that's a huge room to clean anyway. And it's got 3 beds in it. So there's a lot to do in that space. But it'll take you a couple hours to turn a room. I don't think that's a bad thing. I was doing some research and I found, a lot of hotels will say that they can turn a room in, 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes was kind of like on the outside edge, which is shocking to me because that's not enough time for any chemical disinfectant that I know of to really do its work. And obviously they're just cleaning. They're not looking to sanitize or disinfect. That's, before the era of COVID-19. There was a bed and breakfast, I think it was in the state, that was talking about how they have an enhanced cleaning for turning rooms, and it takes them 90 minutes to clean and turn a room. With the fact that the virus does last on surfaces, they're saying that the risk of infection is not as high as they first thought on surfaces, but it definitely still does exist. I think it would be really smart of the lodging industry to advertise that, yes, we take time with our room, we're, spending this amount of time on it, and, the people leave, and there's been 24 hours plus before anybody inhabits that room again. I think that could be a selling point in the future, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, there are a lot of things to do, but once you get in the groove of it, it actually can go pretty fast. And if you have staff that are working with you, and there's more than one person, doing different things, you can have someone stripping beds, and the next person comes in with the steam vapor system, and then, they keep moving as, the beds are stripped, and then you move on to the next room and all those kinds of things. And after I steam everything, usually I go back over hard surfaces, once they've been fully sanitized and disinfected. Then I'll go back over it with a microfiber cloth and just wipe off the mirrors, wipe down the countertops, wipe the glass shower doors, all those kinds of things, because that makes them shine and they're beautiful. And microfiber also catches 99.9% of bacteria and mold and those kinds of things. So it's not like you're hitting it with something that's going to reintroduce stuff, into the environment. And that, if you have a system up where you've got one employee doing X and the next one follows and then the third one follows up, you can get it done in a fairly quick amount of time, I think. But really, I do think that advertising that we take our time and we make sure that this environment is really disinfected well for our incoming guests, I think that's going to be a huge selling point for lodging.
Well, I would think too that, when you start explaining in as simple a terms as possible things like, hypochloric acid and, the vapor system. And when you actually say what you use, it seems that there's going to have to be some educational ramp up of guests, but and that's probably part of what your educational side of your chemical-free inns is about, even though it's focused on chemical-free stuff. There's a lot here that's, I think, helpful to every guest now concerned about COVID-19. But I would think that in saying, here's what we do, rather than just saying, hey, we take our time, and everyone's going to say that. Well, what do you do though? Right?
Right.
So I think that's a part of this. But talk about, if I'm an innkeeper, can I afford to use one of these or have multiple of these if I've got staff, and depending on how many rooms I've got, what can I expect to pay for one of the steam vapor systems out there?
Gotcha. Okay. So there are a number of different models available through Advanced Vapor. So if you are, an actual hotel, if you have, 10 rooms or more, you've got a big property, there's a lot of space, your doorways are wide, your rooms are spacious, nothing is cramped, then the commercial system is great. That's called the MondoVap. It's $3,600, comes with a janitorial cart and a plethora of attachments. It's an amazing machine. I use that, and I also have one of the smaller machines at Enliven. And I love the big machine. It's great, but it is a pain in the behind because I don't have extra wide doorways, and my rooms are normal size. There's not enough maneuverability for that cart, but in a large facility, it would be fantastic. The nice part about these machines right now is that there is financing available through chemical-free inns. If you qualify, we're doing financing through PayPal. It's 6 months with no interest. That helps. Advanced Vapor Technologies, if you buy direct from them, they also have a financing program available. And you're not going to have to buy any more cleaning supplies when you have these products, really. So there's a lifetime warranty on the boiler. Everything I sell has tanks included in it, which means that you get a lifetime warranty on the boiler. I've been using my machines for over 10 years, and they are great. They wear like iron, and I've had to replace a couple hoses, and that's it. So you really don't have any cost going forward. So if you, have the mindset that this is something that you're going to be able to use not just today, not just in COVID-19, but this is going to help you long term, it's a pretty cost-effective way to do business. The smaller machines are the residential, quote, residential machines, and there are 3 different ones. The very first model is the 2200 with tanks, and that one is really good for like an Airbnb, someone who does home share, that kind of thing. That's a perfect size for that. They're pretty lightweight. You can haul them up and downstairs really easily, and that's a great one for that application. The 2300 and the 2350 are more like a small commercial machine. And those two, I think the 2300 is $21.99. Anyway, but they're, between $2,000 and $2,300 a piece. Same thing, you can apply for the 6 months, same as cash financing through chemical-free inns, or you can look at Advanced Vapor Technologies site and they do their own financing through that. But it's really great. All of the residential systems are small enough that if you have a second story, you can take it up with you. It's easy to carry upstairs. The commercial machine, if you have a second story, you would really want to have some sort of an elevator or a dumbwaiter system to bring things up to the second floor, because it's just, you couldn't take it upstairs.
What about so you say that there's a 2200. You also mentioned a Ladybug. I don't know if it's a different model or a different make or whatever.
Sorry.
Isn't there one that's like closer to like the $1,000 or $1,500 range or something? It might, I don't know if it's, if it's heavy duty enough to work, at a bed and breakfast. But I thought you had said when we talked last week that there's something that's, for a smaller inn or bed and breakfast would be sufficient.
Yeah, the smaller one without the tanks processor runs around $1,500, but I don't sell those personally because I want sell machines that have science to back them up, and they haven't been tested without the tanks processor, and so I don't sell those. But those are available on Advanced Vapor Technologies site.
Okay, so it's the same make, just relatively new and unproven as far as the tank or the reservoir or whatever?
Yeah, it's not that it's relatively new. It just doesn't have all of the science that was done on the efficacy of advanced vapor technologies, steam vapor systems, were done on models that had the tank's processor.
Okay.
And that's the patented proprietary, thing that makes it into a disinfection device. And so I don't sell things that aren't classified as a disinfection device. For some people, they don't care. And so Advanced Vapor makes almost all of the models, except for the commercial ones where you can have it with or without tanks. The 2350 Ladybug model does not. That always comes with the tanks in it.
Okay.
But there are other models that don't have tanks. I just wouldn't recommend them because I am such a science nerd. I want to make sure that I'm using something that has the science backing it, that it really, really does disinfect.
Okay. All right. So now let's talk a little bit, maybe finish up on the air, because we've talked about surfaces. You get the hard surface, soft surface. That's what people mostly think of. But, there is also the concern for airborne stuff. And now, even if you're turning a room over, whether it's the same day or 24 hours or whatever, I wouldn't expect there to be an airborne concern, although you can certainly allay those concerns by having some sort of an air processing unit in each room, I would think. But there's also like the idea of, again, not necessarily proven, but you were talking about like in the more public area, like when you come in your front hallway or whatever, you're doing some humidifying with the hypochloric acid. There's also this idea of, if you've got a forced air system, and going back to your whole biofilm thing, there could be biofilms in your HVAC unit or whatever. Talk about some of the things that, and again, you're going to be, I'm sure innkeepers are going to listen and say, that's kind of over the edge, but there's still a lot of, it's up to, well, because that's what you do and that's your focus.
Because that's what I do. I am an
right,
over the edge kind of girl. Yep.
But no, because of your clientele, you need to be, and that's your whole, really almost like life mission right now. So, but still, there's a lot from that people can take and they can say, well, that's a good idea. Maybe we should do that, or maybe that is over the edge. I'm not going to do that, but I'll do this, So talk about what might be done to try to prevent the spread of COVID-19 or whatever through the air, and kind of things you do, and maybe some ideas for innkeepers.
Sure. At Enliven, we have IQ Air filters available as an upcharge, and those are great because they are much better at filtration than a typical HEPA filter. They call it a hyper HEPA filter, and it filters out down to 0.003 microns. And when I was looking things up, as I was doing some research, this, novel coronavirus, the size of the actual coronavirus fragment or whatever it is 0.125. So technically, I believe, the IQ Air should filter out, so that would be something that would be a selling point. IQ Air products are used in hospitals and things like that. I don't think they would go online and say, we filter out the coronavirus per se, but looking at the specs and the details that were online about the size of the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus that is in all of our lives at this point, it looks to me like it would filter it out. So that's one option. Another, of course, is to get an ultrasonic humidifier and run HOCl, hypochlorous acid, in that. There are studies showing that has been effective when studied to take things out of the air. And, has it been studied with an ultrasonic humidifier that you can buy through Amazon? No, it hasn't. But the ones that I have do a great job, and you can literally see it hanging in the air, and it doesn't get floors wet or surfaces damp or anything like that. It does tend to leave behind a bit of a salt residue because part of what's in the solution is, I think it's sodium chloride. Anyway, it can leave a little bit of a salt after effect after it dries. It lands on surfaces and then you'll see it, on dark surfaces and things like that. But that's an option. Really being good about your maintenance is crucial. So if you're a larger property and you have those individual units, heating and cooling in the rooms, those need to be cleaned on a regular basis. The filters, When I was looking online, they have filters that you can take out and they recommend that you rinse them. I would rinse them and then spray them with HOCl and then put them back in. You could always rinse them again if you wanted to after you let it sit for a while. But you want to be doing things that are going to really, help filter the air. Those systems can also be steam cleaned. That's often the recommended practice, is to have someone come in and have them cleaned with steam. So if you haven't done that for a while, that would be a good idea. At Enliven, we just have a furnace that services all of the rooms. So I have a UV light on the furnace to kill bacteria and viruses and mold spores and those kinds of things. I use a high level of filtration, so fairly high. It's MERV 12 is what I use, along with a charcoal filter. And I change those out every month. I think it's just really important to keep things fresh. You don't want to be recirculating air that has anything nasty in it, whether it's a bacteria or a virus or mold spores or dust. You just want to keep things as clean as you can, at least this crazy hygiene lady. That's how I feel. So those are some ideas.
So can we refer to you as the crazy hygiene lady?
You can. I own the hat. My kids call me that pretty much. So, yeah, you can call me that.
The queen of disinfecting.
There we go.
Cool. Well, yeah. And Matt, you usually kind of wind this thing down for us, and you always say anything else. And did I miss any? Did we miss covering anything that we wanted to cover?
I don't think so. This one was pretty comprehensive and we went deep, but I will ask the usual question. And I know Teresa's used to this because this is our second podcast with her. But Teresa, anything else to add today before we sign off?
Oh, gosh. I have just a couple things just to think about. Things that need to be sanitized that we don't often think about, which maybe we do think about as innkeepers, but the obvious things like TV remotes and light switches and knobs and doors and all that kind of stuff. Coffee makers, those are pretty huge. Those are known for being pretty germy. Security safes, the buttons on security safes and the handles and all those kinds of things. And if you have an elevator buttons and railings and walls and doors and even the tracks where they open up, those can actually harbor bacteria. The faces and edges of things, drapery and blind pulls, all those kinds of things you can hit with steam vapor, which is great. And the drains, you need to be careful with drains because if you have PVC pipe, you don't want to do it for more than 3 seconds or so. But taking care of your drains and your shower heads and all those kinds of things, those are all places where bacteria and viruses can kind of lurk, and it's important to keep those tidy and clean. And if you ever want to really get deep into all the places where germs can be lurking, look up Charles Gerba. He's a professor at the University of Arizona, and he's known as Dr. Germ. He is my idol. I love him. He has lots of great information online about, where things are the germiest. He's studied it for many, many years, and some of it is surprising. So that's also a good way to look, good place to get some information about things that you may not be thinking about when you're cleaning your inn that actually can harbor some stuff that you really want to take care of and address.
Yeah, and I think one of the kind of important takeaways of something you said to me just in general is basically there's a difference between sanitizing and disinfecting versus just cleaning. And of course, that is a heavy part of that whole chemical thing. But that's what you got to think about is don't just clean. Figure out how to sanitize and disinfect because that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah. And remember, hygiene is the new luxury, right? So
hygiene
that's a great way to market your inn. And, all of these products, the Ladybug residential systems, the Mondo VAP, those machines from Advanced Vapor Technologies, and the Briotech HOCl, the hypochlorous acid, those are things that I do sell through chemical-free inns. And there are lots of other places that sell them as well. But I'm happy to answer questions if anybody is interested in exploring how to better take care of their lodging facility in a chemical-free way that is really healthy. That's my jam. And I'm totally happy to sit down and talk with people over the phone or Skype or whatever, and then help you explore some ways that you can do that.
And we'll provide links when we post the podcast on our blog. But it's chemicalfreeinns.com. Can people get a hold of you that way?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, excellent. Matt?
All right, good. Well, I will take us out. Great parting shots there. And for all of our listeners, our guest for this episode of the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast was Teresa Luttrell, the owner of Enliven Bed and Breakfast. Located in Kenmore, Washington, Enliven Bed and Breakfast is a chemical and fragrance-free inn. And as you heard, Teresa was kind enough to share her deep dive insights into how innkeepers can safely reopen their properties through the right cleaning and disinfecting strategies. And we really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast, brought to you by the Frictionless Guest app. If you wish to learn more, please visit frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. And Steve and Teresa, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much, Teresa. Great job. We really appreciate it.